So in this lecture, we're going to be talking about branching. Now, in the previous lecture, we did talk about how to get the main idea, the core idea. Now we're going to talk about how to get the branches out of this idea. And you guys will be able to understand these concepts more when you see the examples, the mind mapping examples that we're following, and by just going through the templates that are offered in the course. So what we're doing with branching is basically taking this core information or this core principle and breaking it down into bits and pieces of information related to this core topic or this core main idea that you were working on. Because usually when you have something that you're trying to mind map, it's not something easy. It's not something simple. It's something a bit complex and complicated that needs to be broken down into different bits of pieces of information for you to be able to process it properly. So what we do when we get to branching is that we're slicing it. We should slice your main idea into smaller bits by adding branches. As you guys can see, for example, the first example that we have, where you have the solid orange ball, and then you cut it in half. What's happening in this case is you have one idea and you're cutting it into two different ideas. Then, of course, we're going to be talking about sub-branching in the next lecture. We're going to see how we can even expand that even more. And the example right next to it, you have one core idea, which is where the question mark is, and then you have all the different branches that comes out of it. In the first example, if you want to lose weight, let's say it gets divided into two things, working out and diet, and then sub branches will come afterwards, and they will fill out other bits and pieces of information. But in the second example, when you have a lot of different branches that went out of the core or main idea, if your main idea is, let's say, a marketing plan, for example, you're going to have all the different branches related to, one of them would be related to Instagram marketing strategy, one of them would be related to Facebook marketing strategy, one would be related to SEO, the other would be related to having a marketing plan, right? So then you have a lot more branches. You will be able to figure out how many branches are there for each and every keyword that you have on your mind map. And always make sure that these branches, the ideas in these branches, the words in these branches are related to the core or main idea. Because if you just get an idea out of nowhere and you decide to add it as a branch, this might not help because you're mixing up stuff together. For you to be able to process the information properly through mind mapping, everything needs to be clear and very well structured and eventually coherent. If you have some bits of information that has nothing to do with the core principle, the core idea, or the main idea, you're going to face a lot of obstacles. I've tried it before. I was playing volleyball with a team, and I had really good physique when it comes to volleyball, and I did not really need to work on my physique. What I needed to do is I just needed to gain some weight because my goal was to gain muscle, right? In the same time, I was playing volleyball, so one of my other goals was for me to be able to sustain this physique when it comes to volleyball exercises, which I had. I had what it takes in terms of physique for me to be able to practice and go play volleyball effectively. But when I was mind mapping my fitness routine, I put the main goal as gaining muscle, and then I was adding the branches at what I have to do in terms of diet and all of these things. And then I added a branch for volleyball training. And then I messed up my entire training schedule for months because every single time I'm trying to do training to build muscle, but then I would go back to my mind map and my schedule and I would see that I will also have some things that I have to do for volleyball. And then doing these things would affect the muscle gaining process, and eventually I found that the mind map is not really helping and I don't know what I'm doing. If I have to do weightlifting 5 days a week and then I need to rest for 2 days, when do I do the volleyball? And if I do skip 2 days of weightlifting to do volleyball, then when am I going to do these muscles that I was doing on these days? And then the mind map became so complicated. So if on the other hand I said I have muscle gaining, I have, for example, diet and weightlifting and body weight, and then on another mind map where the keyword is volleyball exercises, and I divided them into two different mind maps with each and every one of it has its own properties and goals and ideas, then it would have been easier. I would have been able to say, okay, I have 3 days for muscle gaining. I'm going to do, for example, legs, then I'm going to do push, and then I'm going to do pull on these different days. And I have this certain diet and these certain exercises. And then I have my volleyball's main idea. And then I have volleyball as my main idea. And then I have all the different branches, what I should eat, the workouts, the cardio. I'm going to do this for 2 days. And then I'll be able to work it out way, way easier. So put the information that are strictly related to the topic you're working on. Even if you want to expand and go into different things, make sure that it's always related, and it's not gonna stop the process of you developing the mind map or effectively execute the mind map that you have. And as simple as it seems, believe me, this is one of the biggest issues when it comes to mind mapping. A lot of people make this mistake of building a mind map based on a lot of different and complex ideas, and eventually they find themselves not figuring out what they have to do properly, and not following up effectively with the mind map. The reason why is because they're not keeping it simple. Every single time you add a branch, ask yourself, is this related to mind mapping, to the mind map that I'm doing or not? Is it related to the main idea that I'm focusing on or not? And if it's not, if it's going to be a problem or an issue or an obstacle, just remove it. Maybe you want to use it later, keep it on a separate piece of paper or whatever. Maybe you don't want to lose it, keep it somewhere, but don't put it on the same mind map. Maybe put it on another mind map, just like the muscle and volleyball example that I gave before. And lastly, you need to go with the flow. You could always add more branches to your mind map as you move on to the next step and the next step. Don't force your brain to think of branches. Instead, let it go with the flow, and it will come naturally. So when you write the main idea and then you figure out 2 of these branches, don't just sit there and think, okay, what other branches, what other ideas do I have related to this main idea, and think about it for an hour. Think about it for a bit. If you find that I can't find any more branches to this main idea, start thinking about what sub-branches you might have. We're going to talk about sub-branches in the next lecture. What kind of sub-branches do I have to these 2 branches that went out of the main idea? Don't dwell on finding more and more branches for the main idea, because eventually people want to find more branches because they think that they're doing mind mapping more properly and more effectively, when in fact the more branches that you have, the more sub branches that you have, the more complicated your mind map would be. That's why I said use only what is related to your mind map, strictly related to your mind map, because when you put all the different information, you have an overflow of information. Your mind map becomes so complex, it's not simple anymore, and it doesn't make the work easier, it makes it harder. And the worst part is when you decide to sit down and think about other branches that you can add just so you can make your mind map more complicated. When you're actually thinking about making it easier for you to be able to understand the information, you're ending up making it harder and harder. When there is something that you really need to know, when there is something crucial to add, you're gonna remember it at one point or another. While working on your branches or sub-branches, you're gonna remember it, and then you go back and you add it, right? But you don't just sit down there and force yourself to find a lot of different branches. Keep it simple, make sure that the branches are related to the main idea, and try to eliminate all of these branches that you think are going to complicate it or are not going to add any value to your mind map, or are just not strictly related to this mind map, and try to use them in another mind map. If they are crucial information, if they are branches, they're usually important, try to see if you can actually build a mind map around them to be able to tackle them as well. And lastly, I'm going to repeat it one more time. Don't force the information out of you. Go with the flow, and you'll see how the information will go out without you even thinking it and forcing your brain into it, without even forcing your brain to think of branches. Let it go with the flow, and it will come to you naturally.